We've talked a little bit about color, and we've talked a little bit about how they relate to each other, the style that you want to pick based on your preferences. But we've looked at color.adobe.com and we've seen the color wheel that they offer. It gives us a few options to pick some colors that we want. Ultimately, I want to use this as a reference and show you how to apply some of these colors into your Photoshop document should you want to tone a particular image in a way. And I want to show you tools to do that in Photoshop. So I think, we've talked about gradient maps for skin tones. We've mentioned that in the Dixie Dixon tutorial. When we did lifestyle. In the lifestyle section, we did that. And we did a lot of color work across this tutorial. But I want to show you something else. And if you haven't seen the gradient map tutorial, that's pretty cool as well. You should check it out. But what I want to talk about specifically is a tool that I always like using, and if I know these codes, the color codes that I want to use, I can apply it directly to Photoshop. I'm going to show you how. So let's say, for instance, we don't do the gradient map for now, and we might do it later, but for now, let's say we use a tone like this where it's more teal, it's more orange, and we want to use these two colors, right? Because this is, again, on color.adobe.com, and we went to our complementary and we picked the scheme that we wanted. I feel like this is a very vibrant and beautiful color, so we'll use Image by Dixie. And over here, we are simply going to come over and first and foremost decide on a method to tone it. We haven't retouched this photograph. This is going to be simply for color work. We'll come up here. We'll talk about, we'll say we call this blend if modes. Because blend if modes are very useful in the sense that they can apply colors in very specific areas. And how we're going to do this is we'll first go into the solid color blend mode. We'll click on that. Now we have this color picker here. With this color picker, we can simply come up here to this base color. And with this base color, we'll come here with this hex code. We'll copy that in. And we will hit paste. You can also save it over here. So you log into your Adobe account, save it, and it should automatically update into your swatches into Photoshop. So under Window and Swatches. But I'm showing you both ways in case you don't have Creative Cloud. And this is a good way to do it. So I've applied that base color here. Now, let's say we want to apply it specifically to a particular area. Well, the way this works is we can go to our blend if modes by right-clicking on the name of the layer. We don't click on the actual layer itself because there's a different set of options. And if we click on blending options, actually the good news is they're in both. So we can click on either one. Just don't click on the mask. So everything else except the mask. So blending options, and then we have this area here at the bottom. It says, let's shrink this down a bit. We'll move it over here because we don't need that other menu. Over here it says underlying area. Now in the underlying area itself, we have these histogram bar that tells me where the shadows and highlights are. These arrows indicate exactly what part of the image is active. So if I move this area over here, you'll notice that it's going to do a cutout. It's going to start cutting out the brightest areas first. You can see it cut out this part here in the background, and then start cutting out the midtones because we're getting into the midtones. If I go backwards, you'll see that the whitest areas are left. So let's say we want to apply this to our shadows, okay? Let's say something like this. Except there's a problem. Everything looks really cut out. It's like cookie cutter shape. It doesn't look really precise, and that's annoying. We want a beautiful transition from the shadows to the midtones. Well, I'll come here and hit Option, click, and expand it like that. So we have a gradation. So I can bring this over, and we have a gradation. Now that we have that in place, we can simply go over and hit OK, and then click on Color, And we can tone these specific areas based on the exact color that we want. So now that we've added this beautiful cyan color into the shadows, the best part about this is we can go back and we can adjust the parameters and the visual impact of how this looks. So if I feel like it was too much in the shadows, I can bring it over there and then feather it off even more. Very visual, very beautiful. It's something that I like a lot because it's easy for me. I can hit OK. And see, just like that, I've toned the shadows the way I wanted to. I picked that color, I realized, because the dress itself had this nice teal color, which complements the shadows, which is great. And now the skin has this nice orangey color that I'm going to enhance even further. So let's do that. Let's add another color, solid color. But this time I can take that code. And I can just type it in if I wanted to. FF631D gets me that exact color. And I'll do the same thing, switch to color. Go to our blending options. And then this time we'll do the opposite. We'll say, no, we don't want it in our shadows, but we want it in everything else. Like so. And maybe we can pull it back even further where it's only in our, there we go, something like that. Let's actually bring it all the way to the highlights. So we can do that. I'll hit OK for now. And you can see that the highlights themselves are a nice orange color. The best part, on top of that, I have masking. I can take the mask with a black brush and make sure the skin itself is not affected. And you can do the same thing here if you want to. Or just by lessening it with a lower flow, bringing some of that back. And so what that does is it creates this nice, beautiful look that complements the existing image. Then on top of that, when you adjust things like vibrance, and then maybe add some contrast, we can do our what's the word called? Let's see, soft light or contouring. We can make it pop a little bit. It creates a particular look that I like. And then if you decide to shift particular colors, we can go into our color balance. And then as a base, if we feel like there's a strong influence of a particular color, we can shift it. So if we feel like the highlights are too yellow, we can push them a little bit to the blue side. We can add some magenta tones maybe. Some different cyan tones. And go into our mid-tones. And essentially just amplify the color scheme we are already working with. Yellows and cyans, or oranges and cyans. Depending on what you're really going for. This I do a lot by eye. So there you go. If I turn it on and off, it's very subtle. Now if I turn off the blend if modes altogether with the color scheme, we can get that as well. And of course you could do the same principle with your 3 sets of colors as well. And depending on the look you want, the colors you're looking for, you can adjust it accordingly. The other method is the same thing we mentioned. I'll recap again with a gradient map. Let's say we have our gradient map. By default, let me just put it down here for a moment. By default, I'm going to put this layer down to 0% opacity. Okay? Now I'm going to take this gradient map, click over here. Depending on whatever colors you have right now, don't worry about it. It's going to be different for every single person. I'll click on the end where the shadows usually are. I'll pick like a teal-ish color here. And then on this side, I'll double click on that point and then pick like a orangish color here. Let's do that temporarily. I'll pick OK. I'll change this to color. Then I'll bring this up. And what that'll do for us is, depending on the kind of color scheme we want, it'll adjust accordingly, and we can change different parameters just by double clicking on these colors here. We can also move it over, so if you want more yellow influence, orange influence across the area, we can do that. We can also add a tertiary color here and get really funky if we need to. Could bring that down again and then just mask out the model. Make sure my fade isn't on. No, it's not. Good. And just a quick general mask. Then I'm going to bring that down even more. Maybe at like 5% or so, which is enough in this instance. It adds a gradient between these teals, these magentas, and oranges, and all the colors in between that gradate between these three. And what it does, it creates this nice, interesting balance of variable tones. Even cooler is if we do a hue saturation and we move the saturation or hue around, but only, whoops, let's see, but only use a clipping layer to the gradient map. And what that does is it creates different color palettes based on the hue that I slide it over to, because it's nudging all the colors in the gradient map together. So if I bring this up real quick like this, it's going to nudge all of these gradients to different color schemes, which is actually really fascinating, depending on what you're trying to do. So I'm going to tone that down again to like, let's do like 8% and turn that off for now. Which goes to show you there's many ways to adjust these color tones here, but it's just a matter of what you want to do, how to do them, and the direction you want to take. But most importantly, the biggest takeaway here is you want to have a clear vision beforehand. And color isn't necessarily an afterthought as much as it is a forethought. You think about mood, you think about emotion, the clothes that are going to be on set, the type of mood that you're going to be playing with on set, the lighting, as well as do you want to use gels, do you want to use particular clothing, where are you going to be shooting this? All of this relates to what you want to do, but hopefully this gives you an insight into some of the tools that I use and some of the tools that I think are easy to get into, and ultimately it becomes up to you and what you want to do.